I think of To Touch the Moon as a performance piece that is composed of three specific performances or immersion theater opportunities. Each episode could stand alone. So you could come and just be a part of episode 1, never come back to the theater, and you would have considered yourself, or you could say that, yeah, I attended this play, all right? And I wanted to be as immersive as I could. And that means creating a very specific environment, all right? Everywhere you look, there the play is happening for you, and we're gonna completely blur the lines between traditional actor and audience, so everybody's a participant. And I knew that I was inspired by this idea of discovery and exploration. And of course, the end goal is we're going to take kids to the moon. But you can't just drop somebody into an experience and say, okay, today you're going to pretend to be an astronaut, we're going to go to the moon, and you're going to go find rocks. Okay, fine. Well, you could, all right? But it would be a very superficial experience, all right? I wanted to create an arc. I wanted to build that adventure, all right? And I wanted the audience participants to star as the protagonist in their own adventure story. That takes time, all right? That took an arc. What was here all the time was this idea of what does it mean to see something for the first time, to discover, to explore. So that became the role of episode 1. What does it mean to be an explorer? And in that space, I tried to put things that I thought most kids would want to look at. Water, plants, the ground, rocks, the sky, stars, the sun, clouds, and the moon. Right? So we plant that seed and we introduce, at the very, I'm going to use the word simplest, or the most, at beginner level, a character. You exploring. And so that whole arc took about 45 minutes from, hi, we're really glad you're here. Will you play Explorer with us? We've got this really cool environment we want you to see, to, oh, will you be somebody that isn't you? Will you be the sun or the moon or a dolphin? Whatever we needed for that final story. So then the next time when they come for episode 2, we're going back in time, but the leap to playing pretend is that much easier because we've already tested that out. Today we're going to be an astronaut and we're getting ready to have an adventure on the moon. What's different is we're going to learn some skills that are slightly different from the ones we used in episode 1. And so this is where this whole idea of training to be an astronaut at Building 9 came in. So then that became the story of episode 2, preparing for an adventure. And then episode 3, of course, is the adventure on the moon. And everything that they do, everything that was done on the moon were all things that episodes 1 and 2 had prepared them for. The difference is now we're doing it in a place that they are asked to imagine through their own lens of creativity. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that question. How did I come up with To Touch the Moon? And to answer that question, I kind of have to go back a little bit in time. All right? Because the story of To Touch the Moon really begins way back in 2010 when I encountered, to the best of my knowledge, for the first time a young person on the autism spectrum who was participating in one of my after-school drama programs. Autism was new to me. I didn't know much about it. And I was observing how this individual was interacting with others in the drama process that I was presenting, and I thought to myself, I'm not serving this individual as well as I would like to. I need to find out more about autism, but more importantly, how theater can support individuals with autism and other developmental delays. And so, like any good academician, I began by trying to do some research and was shocked to find that there was nothing to guide me. There was nothing at all. And to me, that didn't signal despair or that I should give up. That signaled, okay, I need to do something about this. I need to be somebody who begins to contribute to the field and inform others on how to do this kind of work. You know, 2019 was going to be the 50th anniversary of the first lunar landing.
I was 12 years old. I remember the exact spot that I was sitting when I first saw them land on the moon.
I was 13, and it was spectacular.
I remember who the people were around me.
You know, I've told this story before that I was sitting in my parents' house watching this moon landing on this little tiny black and white television set that we owned.
I first got the glimpse of the moon from those really awful black and white, grainy, snowy, disconnected images that came back, 3-minute delay coming back to the Earth.
And even though I knew it made no sense at all, I would run outside and I'd look up at the moon to see if I could see them, knowing that, you know, there was no way that I could, but it was mind-boggling to me.
And that really sparked my imagination as a 12-year-old.
It just captured my curiosity and my imagination. Suddenly I got really interested in space and science and math and engineering. You know, and I wanted to capture that for this audience. Not that I necessarily set out to teach them about science and math and engineering. I didn't even really set out to teach them about the moon. What I really wanted to do was to recreate, to capture what it means to discover something for the first time. What is it like to see something, to experience something, to interact with something for the very first time? And that really is how To Touch the Moon began its evolution. All right, so I'm going to do this moon project, right? Okay, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to explore and discover. I know that I want to explore moon stories. I know that I want to explore going to the moon. And I know that for all that to happen, I need to learn a lot, all right, about space travel, about our mission to the moon. You know, I really had to get informed. So I reached out to the Iowa Space Consortium, which is sort of like our state's NASA agency. And what I'm about to tell you is true of every single science-based individual I talked to. They all went, oh, wow, that is a really cool idea. That is a really cool idea. And then their next question was always, how can I help? What do you need? And so it was through the support of the Iowa Space Consortium that I and Mark Parrott got to travel both to Huntsville, Alabama, and to Houston, Texas. In Huntsville, we spent a weekend at the Marshall Space Center, and that is where they host Space Camp. Now, we weren't official participants in Space Camp. We weren't campers, but we got to experience so much of what those campers get to do. We got to learn more of the history of not only the mission, but the stories of people who contributed to that mission. And so Mark and I left these two very different experiences with some very, feeling like we had gotten all this really rich information and firsthand experiences that began to really shape the kinds of adventures we wanted to present to our target audience. Didn't quite know how we were going to get there yet, but felt that we had a wealth of information that we could begin to draw from.
Well, when we started talking about this project a year and a half ago, the real design challenge that we had was, how are we going to recreate the moon? How are we going to recreate a natural environment in northwest Iowa? And how are we going to recreate the NASA laboratory that's in our episode 2? And all of that has to happen in basically the same location. The biggest challenge that I had, it was, how do I make that all fit into one space? I cheated. I asked for the second space. So we now have episode 1 and episode 3, Northwest Iowa, the moon, in one space under an environment. And then the NASA laboratory is going to be located on our main stage. I think some of the things that we've done differently on this project is because it's so big, and it's requiring an environment that we have never done before. We have never created a totally enclosed environment, and in this particular case, it's a dome. The challenge is not, for me, is not necessarily meeting with the 360-degree rotation of the scenic component, but we're going to have people touching the fake rocks. So we have to make the fake rocks, work for more than 360. We're talking about 360 plus touching and handling and standing on top of. And a lot of times our audiences don't get to do that kind of thing. They don't get to sit in the dirt on the stage. That's not normally what happens. And so we embrace that fact, and so that I try to make the rocks and I try to make the stuff, the other kinds of props that I'm using to be really reliably real this far away. And that's the other component here is to keep our audience engaged, but make sure that everything that we're doing is friendly to their world. So depending on no matter what their skills are or what their knowledge base is. We were in the midst of a big project prior to Touch the Moon, and so I knew, I figured out the time that it would take for us to try to build the dome components, and I said, I just don't think we have time to do this and do it properly and do it well. And so, given the time restraints that we had, and so I contracted the UNI Public Art Incubator to build the dome, the actual dome structure. And so that's a step away, because that's one of those things where you design it and then you have to let it go and hope that it comes back the way that you wanted it. So it was really exciting to see it installed, because all of the points landed exactly where they were supposed to land. So they did it exactly the way that I drew it. And so as a possessive designer, I don't really like letting go of things. But in this particular case, I was thrilled that we were able to make the contacts and do this interdisciplinary approach to working on this show. The dome, all of the electronic panels, that's a fantastic opportunity for students to see other things done in other ways that we might not actually have the time and the ability to do.
This theater experience differed in so many ways for the university students who were participants. All right. So again, traditional theater. We each have a very specific role. Director, actor, designer, technician. I'm going to work on props. I'm going to work on lights. And we're going to spend 6 weeks learning how to do all those jobs together, and boom, we're going to have a play. None of that applies to this production. None of that applied to this project. All right. The 22 university students who participated from August until final curtain on April 28th worked in multiple modes of creative expression. All right. They did everything. We devised the content. We determined what was going to be included in the script. But the most important thing they had to learn was how to work with another actor who wasn't even going to be present. until the first performance. And, those are our audience participants. So it completely changed everything. It took, let me back up a minute. It certainly was informed, their work was informed by what they knew about theater, but how they were using that information was completely different from anything they had done before.
So what drew me to this project as an actor was it's a very different type of acting than I'm used to. I'm used to doing dramatic contemporary plays. It's a very simple, not simple, but it's a very different type of acting where it's learning your lines, learning your character, know what you want. In this case, the kids that are coming to see the show, it's about placing them in this 360-degree environment and taking them to wherever they want the story to be, and if that story is just a little leaf on the ground, that they're super interested in the texture of the leaf and feeling that leaf. That's where I'm going to take the audience member to, and I'm going to have this sort of empathetic acting where it's a real give and take rather than me giving out the energy as an actor in a normal show. I'm really taking what they're giving me and we're creating the story together.
The biggest discovery I've made is how to think on your feet. I'm a very type A person. I always stick to the script. I always play by the book. But Greta has taught us that it's okay to play by ear and to discover things that you wouldn't normally discover outside of a structured analysis of a play. So getting into device theater was really intimidating to me because I knew that it would be coming up with things on the fly. And I wasn't prepared for how much energy it took to follow that creative impulse deep inside of you. But I am so glad that I did, and I'm so glad that we've gotten to the point that we're at.
And that wasn't without some frustration. It was overwhelming at times. But they all said at the end that, it was really, really worth it, in that what they learned about themselves, what they learned about the audience, what they learned about theater, what they learned about the power of a personal connection through the performing arts far surpassed, any of the frustration and the anxiety that, was a part of creating an original piece. Some of them talked about the fact that they found it life-changing in many ways as a creative artist. The work was warmly received, very, very warmly received. There's always a tiny challenge when I do this work in helping to ease the anxiety of parents, teachers, and caregivers. The greatest compliment that I got, and I say this from a place of love for the project, okay, because I heard it more than once, was, "You thought of everything. You thought of everything." And that ranged from making the space accessible, keeping things interactive, costume pieces that didn't have labels, that didn't have zippers, that just had buttons. A safe space, a way to communicate without using language, a visual schedule so they knew what was going to happen next. So yeah, you thought of everything. The other way I know that it was well received is that parents in some cases brought their young person to all 3 episodes. They registered for 1. Well, we'll try it. And then afterwards, can we come tomorrow? Can we come for part 2? Can we come for part 3? There were some young people who came to the entire series more than once.
Many students had the opportunity to come to all 3 episodes, and each time they were paired with a specific actor. So it was the same actor each time, and so the student participants started to develop this really close connection to that person. And that college actor became aware of the students' particular needs and interests and was really able to tailor the experience to each student. So by the time we reached episode 3, they'd been through 2 kind of adventures together, and episode 3 was the culmination of all of their work. You could really see that they were excited to see their partners. They knew what was coming, they felt comfortable, but also they were a little sad at the ending that they had to leave, and they realized that that would be the last time they worked with their partner. So I really commend our students for being so engaging and adaptable and flexible and really working to create those bonds and make the experience positive for the students.
Kids liked the show, and they're being very specific about the experiences that they had that they liked. And they definitely feel that either they would come again or other kids should get a chance to come again. They're very adamant about that.
So we became aware of just the incredible impact that the project had on the students. And one of the ways that we got feedback was from testimonials from teachers and principals and even the parents. But one principal in particular shared a story about a student that he works with. He says, "Kaylee comes to my office every week to read to me. Today, when she finished, I let her pick a bookmark. She told me she chose The Astronaut because she knows a lot about the moon now. We only read for 2 minutes, but she stayed behind for 10 more to tell me all about what she learned about the moon. What a powerful experience for our kids." It's that type of feedback that really lets us know that we were successful in engaging those children and that they carry a lot away from this that they'll keep with them for a long time.
One of the things that university programs doing this kind of work can contribute to the field at large is some research-based documentation. And so Jennifer was curious about how do young people think about their theater experience, and how do they communicate what they're thinking about that experience to others. So, and I'm talking to you today about this question 4 weeks after the final curtain, almost to the day, all right? And so we've just started to sort of scratch at the surface of the information that we've collected. You know, she's very encouraged, you know, by what, by the enlargement that she's already seen just in this, you know, initial first glance at the research. So stay tuned. We're hoping to have a lot more.
So we're really hoping that To Touch the Moon has a life after its UNI performances. So we have carefully saved all of the environments, all of the components that went into making the various episodes. And we've started discussions with various groups, especially the Iowa Space Consortium, and we're exploring how we might be able to raise funds to create a To Touch the Moon tour. And this would be an opportunity to take the same group of actors and the same environments out to different facilities and work with those facilities to really build that audience and to take over their space in the same way that we took over our space, and to expand the opportunities for more students to have a taste of what To Touch the Moon was all about, and to maybe use it as a way to demonstrate to other schools and communities how they might engage in this type of work. So right now we're very much looking forward to Touch the Moon and its future possibilities.